Hello and welcome to the Importance of Pride in Rural Ontario, the third webinar in our Out in the Country webinar series hosted by Kincardine Pride. So we're going to talk about what actually is Pride. We're going to look at the research results of a 2020 study I conducted on the importance of Pride in rural Ontario. We're going to look at how you as community members can better support Pride in your rural towns. And we're going to look at rainbow washing, what that actually means versus allyship, so you can ensure that when you are supporting Pride, you're not being token. And then finally, we're going to look at the future of rural Pride. So what does Pride actually look like once we're back in person and not doing just virtual things? So LGBTQ2+ Pride, or commonly just called Pride, it's the promotion of the self-affirmation, dignity, equality, and increased visibility of LGBTQ+ people as a social group. There's many different elements within that that can also be included, but it's basically about validating LGBTQ folks as a social group and ensuring that they are socially accepted just like any other group would be. Pride organizations are any group or organization, they can be formal not or informal, that provide that community-based programming around events and or education in the name of LGBTQ2+ Pride. So Pride organizations, I typically group them in two different ways. So there's town and community Pride. So these are Pride organizations that have one geographic focus. So Kincardine Pride, Toronto Pride, Guelph Pride, versus the county and region prides, which have a diverse or a larger geographic range. So Oxford County Pride, Peel Pride, Grey Bruce Pride. So they focus on a larger area, sometimes one upper tier municipality or multiple, like Grey Bruce Pride. So Peel Pride, for instance, they focus on all of Peel region, but also they do programming specific to Brampton, Mississauga, their communities within their larger area. There are also about just over 60 known Pride organizations across Ontario. So those Pride organizations can be as large as Toronto Pride, which many folks are familiar with, to smaller Pride organizations like Kincardine, and even as small as the newest Pride organization I'm aware of, which is in Southport, Ontario, which is Eastern Ontario, which is a community of about 400 people. And that just goes to show that Pride organizations don't rely on population. They just require passionate and outgoing people who want to make a change. So looking at the research results of the research study that I conducted last year. So just very briefly, I did two separate surveys, one for the LGBTQ audience and one for the non-LGBTQ audience, and compared them to find all these results. So what did I actually learn about the survey respondents themselves? So there was a large geographic range of folks who filled out the survey. 95 separate rural communities were represented in the survey, from south as Windsor to north as Red Lake and as east as Plantagenet. And 72% of respondents have indicated that they've actually attended their small towns Pride Parade, festivities, or any other kind of main event that the Pride organization offers. So the respondents, I asked them about their sexual orientation and gender identity, as I wanted to make sure that LGBTQs were properly represented in the survey. So a little over half, so 54% were straight. And then there's a variety of LGBTQ sexual orientation. So 22% gay and lesbian, they're bisexual, pansexual, demisexual, queer, and asexual were all represented as well. For gender identity, as you can see, 63% were cisgender females, which is not surprising, as there's lots of research stating that women are more welcoming of LGBTQ issues and people. So I'm not surprised that women were more likely to click on the survey link. I'm also happy to see that there's trans representation, agender representation, as well as non-binary representation within these survey results. So 46% of individuals were from non-heterosexual identities, and 12% were from non-cisgender identities as well. So one of the first things that I set out to figure out is what were individuals' experiences with being out in rural Ontario. So something that was a surprise was 55% of individuals said that they were completely out and everyone in their life within the rural town knew that they were LGBTQ2+. 19% either said that several people or only a handful of people in their lives know, and only 6% said that they were not out at all, which really goes against this myth that folks in rural Ontario are closeted, they're not out, they're hiding. 55% of survey respondents are out and proud, which is great to see. Non-LGBTQ folks were also asked if they were LGBTQ, would they feel safe to come out in the rural towns? So 92% of individuals said yes, either completely or partly, which is amazing to see. And there's more questions throughout my survey that also looks at exactly that. Do LGBTQ folks themselves feel safer now? First time coming out, so similar to whether someone was out, I also wanted to know, did folks come out in the rural towns? Did they do the kind of the traditional story of LGBT folks like myself who were in the closet living in their small town and then came out once they went off to the big city? So about a little more than half, so 55%, did come out when they were in the city, whether that was in their youth, so maybe they lived in the city as a kid, and then they moved to a rural town as an adult. And then 41% actually came out while they were living in a rural community. So whether that is as an adult or as a youth. So we're going to look at some of the challenges and barriers in rural communities that I asked about within this research study. So 43% believe that it's religious and or social conservative values, 19% believe it's remoteness, 17% think it's lack of diversity, 16% small population, and 5% all of the above. Nearly 50% of respondents believe that religious and or social conservative values, and again, 17% of you here listening on this call agree with this, believe that, again, religious and social conservative values are the #1 barrier for the LGBTQ community. And some additional themes that came out of this question were some other barriers that the LGBTQ folks face. So just lack of education about LGBTQ people and issues, lack of safe spaces, activities, and programming for youth. So like networking opportunities and peer groups, the lack of LGBTQ specific social services, so counseling, physical health, sexual health, mental health that are specific to LGBTQ individuals, and then the lack of role models, mentors, and community leaders, whether they're LGBTQ themselves, and there's also the additional piece of just allies. So this is within politicians, teachers, business owners, and so on. Hate speech, and specifically homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia, we know everyone experiences. So I wanted to know, of my respondents, how many have experienced hate speech and where have they experienced it? So 87% of survey respondents stated they have experienced some form of hate speech within their rural communities. So the vast or the highest number of individuals indicated that in public is where they experience hate speech the most. So this is walking down the street, at public events, community events. So 26% of survey respondents said that they have indirectly experienced that. So that's when you're witnessing it. And 20% of individuals, so LGBTQ folks, have actually experienced homophobia, transphobia, or biphobia just being out in public. And then that's followed up by being at work. So 22% for both witnessing and actually personally experiencing it, have they witnessed or experienced hate speech in the workplace. What is the impact of pride in rural Ontario? So again, we just talked about hate speech, but does it actually change anything? So again, 87% of rural LGBTQ Ontarians, so the survey respondents, have indicated that they have experienced hate speech. So what this research has shown is 33% of these respondents who have experienced hate speech believe that Pride has actually decreased that hate speech within the communities, meaning Pride is actually changing these communities from hateful places to more welcoming, inclusive places. And I think it's also important to note that 21% of individuals are not aware of hate speech in their community at all. So there's a couple layers to that, and based on some of the additional feedback within the questions around the hate speech, a lot of it I think just has to come down to education. Some folks might not know some certain terminology, some derogatory terms or statements. They might not realize those are actually considered homophobic or transphobic. So that's part of why that number is around 21%. So has Pride created a sense of safety and acceptance? All respondents were asked, since Pride was created in your town, do you feel it has improved the overall acceptance of LGBTQ folks in your community? And 65% of individuals believe that is true. They believe that Pride programming hasn't increased the acceptance. And then LGBTQ folks specifically, 60% of them feel that Pride has made it so they themselves feel more supported, feel more safe, and welcomed within the rural communities. So again, Pride creates a more welcoming, safe, and more accepting community. This is a stat that I like sharing quite a bit, or a slide I like sharing quite a bit, and it's around a better childhood. So for the LGBTQ individuals who answered the survey, they were asked, if your town's Pride organization or Pride festivities was around when you were younger, do you believe it would have eased directly or indirectly your coming out journey? So 72% of LGBTQ respondents stated that Pride would have eased their coming out journey. So that's something that we need to look at too, the importance of Pride, not just for the LGBTQ community as a whole, but for youth specifically, and what it actually means to see the Pride flag, to see these parades, to see these festivities all around someone's identity. So again, Pride has so many personal, important meanings for so many different people. So I'm going to go briefly over ways that you as individuals, as businesses, or what have you, can get more involved in Pride organizations. So these are just some very quick ideas for you. So if you're an individual, how do you get involved with Pride? How do you celebrate in the month of June, or even year round for that matter? So one of the easiest ways is decorate your house. So put up Pride flags, put up signage, find rainbow decor, be the most rainbow and Pride friendly house on the block. That's a super simple way of doing it. Actually attending your local Pride events. There's nothing worse than planning an event and no one shows up. And so make sure that you're watching, or even marching in your Pride parade. Attend education events. So education events like this, where you're learning about what are LGBTQ issues and terms, what are the challenges, and just ways to better support the LGBTQ community in your rural town. Just learn and also watch things like documentaries and TV shows with LGBTQ focuses. And then ask your local Pride organization how you can get involved, whether that's their board of directors, volunteer opportunities. Community events always need volunteers, whether it's blocking off streets for the parade or people setting up the festivity in the local park. Just ask ways that you can get involved. For those of you who are part of businesses or different organizations, you can get involved by, again, similar to your house, decorate your business, put up Pride flags on your business, create different displays if you have certain rainbow products. Do fun things like that. Hold some of your own programming as well. So if you're a restaurant or a business that has a large space that can hold events, consider hosting a drag night. Consider hosting a speakers panel on LGBTQ issues in your community. Do windows displays, all that kind of stuff. Sponsor Pride events. Put your money where your mouth is. So it's one thing to put up the Pride flag and say, oh yes, we support local Pride, but sponsor them and show that you truly are committed as a business to support Pride organizations. And then make sure you're educating your staff on how to better support LGBTQ clients and colleagues as well, or even host a public event as well. So find topics like this webinar series and hold it yourself, and find a speaker to come in and educate your community. If you're a service like a library or a bookstore even, host things like drag queen story time. That's a super popular thing that we're seeing happening through Pride organizations. So drag queens come in and read to kids. It's an amazing time. Feature LGBTQ authors, and if you're somewhere that sells movies, have movies featured. If you're a museum or an art gallery or some kind of other public space like that, create exhibits on the history of LGBTQ issues and people in Canada or even in your local community. So next we're going to talk about rainbow washing versus allyship. Oops. So rainbow washing is the act of using or adding rainbow colors and or imagery to advertising, apparel, accessories, landmarks, or whatever else you can think of that you can make rainbow in order to indicate progressive support for LGBTQ equality. But it is done with minimum effort or pragmatic results. So as the image on the right says, putting up a rainbow for 1 month every year is not allyship, it's just marketing. So often in Pride Month, we will see images like this. We will see all of the different companies switching their logo to rainbow colors for the month of June. We see food and beverage companies making their products rainbow, whether it's Oreo and the actual filling is rainbow or the packaging. Again, we see clothing, we see shoes, we see Lego just announced this Pride Lego set that folks can display. And a lot of the times, companies and sometimes even ourselves as LGBTQ individuals will think, look at all these companies that support me. But that's not always true. And this is an image that's shared quite frequently right now on social media. There's all these companies that, US-based companies that have switched their logos for Pride, but if you actually look into their history, they're donating millions of dollars each to anti-gay politicians, and that's not even including other countries. This is just state-based stats that's on your screen here. And then it's also, you got to remember, a lot of these organizations might not have LGBTQ friendly policies or healthcare plans and just workplace environments. So it's something we always got to look into. So a lot of times we think, oh, if someone puts up a logo that's rainbow, they're great. But there needs to be more. We need to question that. So two examples of companies who are doing some good work and aren't necessarily rainbow washing. So Bud Light, so they change their cans to rainbow colors every Pride Month. So Enjoy with Pride. And they also donate to Rainbow Railroad, which is a Canadian nonprofit that helps refugees across the world who are seeking safety based on their sexuality or gender identity. So $1.45 from each 6-pack that someone buys, up to $100,000 goes to Rainbow Railroad. Similarly, Skittles has been doing this campaign for the past couple of years. So they take all of the colors out of their Skittle packs and they have this gray packs. And then the candy itself is gray. So it's only one rainbow matters during Pride, give the rainbow. So their kind of messaging is around until we are all equal, LGBTQ folks get the rainbow during Pride Month. So similarly, $1 from each pack purchased will be donated to GLAAD, which is an American LGBTQ organization, up to $100,000. And you might think, oh, this sounds great, but if you also look into this on the other end, Bud Light's parent company had an annual revenue of $46 billion last year, and Skittles' parent company had an annual revenue of $35 billion. 2019 Skittles sales alone was $320 million. So $100,000 is not that much to these companies. It's still good work that they're doing, but $100,000 could be more. So again, demand more of companies and don't think just because there's rainbow happening that they are necessarily inclusive. So what does this actually have to do with rural communities? So visual representations such as crosswalks, pride flags, signs and stickers on your business windows, they're extremely, extremely important. Visual representation can make a world of difference for folks. But sometimes these visual representations can be seen as tokenism, especially dependent on the organization and business that's raising the flag, putting the sidewalk sticker on the window. So we need to be cautious of wording on signage. And Generic high-level statements like love is love, happy pride, just a simple pride flag, those are more safe areas. Always consider what kind of wording or visual you might have, because it might be interpreted that your staff have training. So if you have a sticker on the front of your business that says this is a safe space typically comes with kind of training. So if an LGBTQ person comes into your business seeking some kind of support, they might be expecting a certain level of support that your staff is not trained for. And the example on the right is something that my employer at the time that we did as a fundraising campaign for Kincardine Pride. So we take pride in our downtown. So these are just window clings that we did. So again, that's another way that you can get involved if your business wants to sponsor doing little window stickers and selling them to raise funds for your local pride organization. We're also seeing more and more school boards, specifically Catholic school boards, flying pride flags for the first time ever. So we're seeing Ottawa doing it, Toronto, Niagara. It's very exciting news. It sounds amazing, right? It is, but at the same time, again, when we're demanding more, we need to look at what are Catholic schools actually teaching. So the family life education curriculum teaches a variety of different things around what it means to be LGBTQ. So my source for this is the family life education curriculum, as well as some colleagues who work within the Catholic school system. So just two of the things that this curriculum teaches is true love can be between a man and a woman. Or sorry, true love can only be between a man and a woman. Two men can have love, but it's not true. And similarly, same-sex attraction exists, so gay people exist, but it is contrary to God's plan. So again, it's great to see that Catholic schools are raising flags, but when they have curriculum like this, it kind of calls into question, is it just tokenism, raising a flag? So you're probably wondering, should Catholic school boards be flying pride flags? Yes, absolutely. Symbolism such as pride flags can make such a world of a difference for youth and LGBTQ folks as a whole, especially those who are trying to navigate how to be LGBTQ and how to keep their religion. So it can be difficult to navigate for some folks. So seeing a Catholic school raising pride flag can be extremely important for them. And whether it's a school, whether it's a Fortune 500 company, or your local coffee shop, we always need to expect and demand more than just that symbolism. So make sure that when you're seeing someone raising a pride flag, changing their logo on Facebook for June, that's not the only thing they're doing. And they're not just doing it in June, they're doing it year round. They're doing education, they have policies and procedures in place. They're doing a whole bunch of things. So again, visuals are important, but do more than just those visuals. So be aware of the issues LGBTQ folks are experiencing on the local level, on the national level, on the provincial level, or an international level. Ensure all staff have regular education around supporting LGBTQ clients as well as their coworkers, and expand this training around other identity groups too. So look at race and ethnicity, look at accessibility and disability. Ensure that your organization has policies, that should be procedures that are inclusive of LGBTQ folks. And again, run your own education initiative and educate your community on all of this. And then finally, we're going to talk about the future of Rural Pride. So one of the questions that I asked within my research survey was, how satisfied are you with your Rural Towns Pride organization? So 37% said they were very satisfied and 32% somewhat satisfied. And only a small percentage said that they were dissatisfied with their pride organizations. So some of the ideas that individuals, the survey respondents had about improving their pride organizations, I've listed here and on the next slides. One thing you got to remember is that every pride organization is different depending on how they're set up, their capacity to create events, their funding capacity. Some pride organizations don't have a full parade yet. They might just have a flag raising, but that's still such an important piece for that community. So again, some of the ideas that survey respondents came up with, so a pride parade or pride event. Again, rural communities appear to either offer a parade or more of a festival type park event. Another idea that came out was a physical space dedicated to LGBTQ individuals and programming. So a lot of the larger cities have that. So Waterloo region has Spectrum, which is an LGBTQ space who also does education and a bunch of different things. Also, age-specific programming such as programming that is specific to family and children. We know in rural Ontario that family and community is a huge part. So that naturally fits with a lot of things. So family and children programming, but also remembering to offer programming and events around older and aging individuals. So we got to remember, just because someone is living in the retirement home or they're over 90 doesn't mean that they're not gay and want to celebrate. So we got to remember that the older generations want to celebrate in some capacity as well. So we have to make sure that there's programming for them. Some other themes were larger entertainment events, so drag shows. So every research thing that I've done with Rural Pride, drag has always come up. So if you're ever looking for an idea to get folks out, look into getting some drag queens to your small town and hosting an event. Greater awareness and visibility. So again, doing those pride flags, the windows displays in your downtown, as well as, again, that super important education piece for communities. And then probably one of the more trickier suggestions that came out of the survey was greater support from community leaders, so politicians and other leaders, police, firemen or firefighters, teachers, and so on, marching and participating within your pride events. So one of the last pieces that I asked within my survey was, do you believe pride is needed in your rural community? 83% of folks completely agree, 9% somewhat agree, and again, very few say no. So we know that both LGBTQ folks and straight cisgendered folks believe that pride is important for their community. And again, those earlier slides about creating an accepting, welcoming community, we know that there's also evidence behind that, not just the belief. So yeah, so pride is needed in more communities. So just some closing thoughts before we go to questions. Pride is needed in rural Ontario for a variety of important reasons. So again, safety, acceptance, inclusion, among a variety of other reasons. Everyone has a role they can play in supporting LGBTQ folks in rural communities. And my question to you is, what will your role be?